the climate crisis, as we know, is here with us and it has no borders. And it's impacting people's lives, ecosystems, and species all across the world. And addressing this global crisis requires us to have profound and innovative transformations in all facets of life, from energy production, food and other goods, designs and construction of infrastructure, marine and freshwater habitats, and even transport. So all these systemic changes for us to be, let's say, on the right side of climate change requires financial resources and sound investment. And this is why from time to time we hear of climate financing and how costly it is and all that. Okay, so today here I have with me a guest who is a young woman passionate about climate financing, a young woman who would call an expert in climate finance. Okay, we hear all types of financing, but climate crisis is here with us, and we're told for us to move in the right directions, we need actual money to make all these things happen. And those things, like I mentioned up there, infrastructure, like there are places that every time there's rains, places are wiped out, and all these things to be able to provide proper infrastructure for these places, we need money. So we can't run away from the fact that this crisis will require money, and we are here. So I'd just like you to introduce yourself to the Loud Voice podcast community. We are always talking about climate change, climate action, and climate justice. Okay, so I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and just state who you are and what you do before we can actually continue from here.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Dolphine Magero, founder and CEO of the Green Youth Climate Fund Institution Initiative. Yes.
Okay.
Basically, what we try to do, having been a youth within the climate change space, we faced a lot of challenges because I started youth and climate change back when I was on campus. There's always a lot of challenges of accessing financing. You really had to beg these donors and be friends with them before they could support even small youth activities like a workshop. So basically, when we continue to engage within the climate change space, I identified a gap in that the existing financing mechanisms under the Convention on Climate Change do not really speak or address the youth needs, basically. Yeah. So in that regard, we decided to set up this initiative that is looking to find a space for youth to be able to access climate financing within the existing and, of course, outside the existing UNFCCC climate finance mechanisms.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know climate change has so many abbreviations and terminologies and everything. And let me just put this across. This podcast is meant for people who are not really in the space yet. Okay. But as we know, the climate crisis is here with us, all of us, whether we like it or not. But not everybody is going to be in the space. But we still acknowledge that we can all do something from whichever point we are at or whichever sector we are at to help solve this. So this podcast is kind of just to make it easy for people who have not been in the spaces but who still want to do a thing or two to help us all like collectively solve the issue. Okay, so is abbreviation UNFCCC.
I will expound on them. I will simplify them, localize them.
Exactly.
Yes.
So as we start, I'd just like to ask, what is climate financing? What does it mean?
So many people, okay, first of all, there's no global definition of climate finance like you've had. But for you to be able to understand climate finance, I must tell you about environmental finance, because climate change is part of the environmental agenda, though it's a debatable thing. Yeah. So you need to understand the concept of environmental finance, basically. You remember there's an activist, she was called Rachel Carson. Before Wangari Maathai, we had Rachel Carson. So Rachel Carson basically was an activist through her writing and research on how our activities were affecting the environment. So after so many activists have come up, of course, we can't fail to recognize Wangari Maathai basically for her work and her role on climate change issues, basically. Exactly. we've of course been, the international community sat down in Rio in 1992 to unpack how basically climate change, how basically our development activities, basically building roads, building industries, is affecting the environment. So this was called the Rio Earth Summit. So at the Rio Earth Summit, this was like the baseline year for all environmental issues basically at the global level. So this one, we had like breakout groups. So we had 4 key breakout groups. One on climate change, which was identified, was one of the environmental areas that are being impacted by development. One on biodiversity, one on forest, and the one on POPs, persistent organic pollutants. So all these pollution issues. So in 1992, basically, is when the concept of environmental finance was born, because they agreed, yes, there's an issue, but we need resources to support them. So it was proposed that at the national level, the governments would, of course, be able to provide, to look for 60% of the resources they need to address their national environmental issues, and the international community would mobilize the other 40%. So this is the concept of environmental financing and the concept of co-financing. So you start as a country, then the international community is going to come in and add you. So the concept of additionality of environmental finance. But other than that, now the breakout groups realize that they are really in-depth, a lot of work that have to go into most of these things. In this regard, when the group on climate change met, basically they met in Germany in 1995 for the first time. Basically, is what we have today as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So then they started discussing about issues of environment. Even before that, at 1992 in Rio, basically, there was need to set up a facility, a body that would coordinate the mobilization of that 40%, basically, that was needed. And this is how the Global Environmental Facility was formed, GEF. So GEF was supposed to mobilize resources basically for climate change, biodiversity, persistent organic pollutants, and all other things practically to support us to be able to restore our environment. But when you go deeper into issues of climate change, basically, the climate change group felt like they needed a fund, they needed resources, financing mechanisms, basically climate financing that addresses specifically on climate finance or addresses issues of climate change. So that is when we've had various funds. We've had the GCF continue to support, but they needed something to focus on the climate change issues that they were beginning to unpack. And
before you continue, I know this is
yes.
I've heard you speak about these things, and I know how much important people need to hear this. But before we go into the nitty-gritties of it, where is this climate financing supposed to come from, and who is it going to? We are supposed to be like putting the 40% and the 60%. Who is supposed to be funding this, and who is it going to? And why is it important?
This is a very good question, because when we sat down as the international community, which today is called the UN, basically, we say that our development efforts are hurting the environment. So we say that we looked within ourselves. Who is developing? We took a stock take, and we found that the developed world, Europe, are the ones who are at the forefront in environmental degradation.
Well, basically the first world country.
Yes. Okay. So that one is what birthed the concept of, we hear, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. CBDRCRC, basically. So basically it says that because the developed world basically has gone and participated in the industrial revolution that has emitted amount of carbon that has created climate change, they should pay more. And they should give us, because us as Africa, as Kenya, as developing nations, we were under colonial rule, we were not engaging in any development agenda, we only recently got independence, we are still struggling to grow our economies. So we put it as a baseline for environment, in that it is a principle, almost like the polluter pays principle in environment. So because you are the people who created it, you must take lead. Yes, we will come, because we are also cognizant of how our efforts have affected the environment. We will follow you, but you have to take lead. Yes, you have to take lead. And how do you take lead? You give us financing. You compensate us, pay us, because...
So let me understand this. So basically what you're trying to say is through the industrial revolution and then them building their countries and all that, they used Earth's resources.
Yes, they
Okay.
they destroyed the environment.
Okay, not used, destroyed.
They destroyed the environment.
Destroyed the environment to develop themselves.
Yes.
We are not there yet.
Yes.
So because you have, you've brought the problem, you pay for the problem.
Yes.
The problems you've caused.
Yes, because you've made money out of it. You've made money out of destruction, out of cutting our trees, setting up industries. So you are responsible for environmental degradation because you are the forefront. Because we just came from colonial rule and we've just been because climate change, you need to understand it. It is an environmental issue, but it is also a developmental issue, basically, because development affects the environment. And who has been at the forefront of development? The first world countries. So they have to pay us because now, but the effects of their developing, they're not limited to their areas per se. It is cross-cutting across the entire world, basically. So we are just victims of your actions. We are living the consequences of your actions. And us, we're even more disadvantaged in that we don't have the economic muscle, financial capacity to be at a point where when a crisis happens, you as a first world country, you're quickly able to adapt, basically put in measures because you have the economic muscles. We as a developing nations, we don't have that much economic muscles to bounce back from shocks quickly. Like for example, COVID. We are usually at the tail end of things. If a pandemic happens, we are the tail end because we don't even have that economic muscles.
Our resources are down, for example, hospitals and all that. And yes, I wanted to ask you that question because in so many meetings, there's been that many of they polluted, and they're fine, but it's us who are actually suffering the most of the effects of climate change. And I'd just liked you to this is not in climate finance, but just shed light and unpack it a little bit on why this is so.
I know this is a lame for the try put in the very laymanest language that is there basically. When I'm an environmental by background's environment. The environment basically we have something called, we work in terms of, the environment is organized in terms of ecosystems. Environment does not quite know Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, what it is coordinated in terms of ecosystems basically, and ecosystems tend to overlap. You understand? Like for example, take it in a very small context. The trees and the rivers are related. Basically, there is a way the system, the hydrological cycle. So we operate in terms of an ecosystem. If you cut down a forest, it is going to affect the water, which is going to affect the soil. It will affect more and more things. So anything you do to the environment has a ripple effect, basically, to the rest of the of the ecosystems, because ecosystems tend to overlap, basically. And that one brings in the issue of species displacement, basically. For example, the concept of, we see climate change is attributed to issue of coastal erosion or rising sea levels. What is the impact of coastal erosion? From a climate change person, you can say sea level rise and stop with that. But from an environmental perspective, I'm going to tell you, we're going to have what's called ecotone extension, because ecotone is the boundary between ecosystems, which means that if basically there is issue of coastal flooding or seawater erosion, basically, it means that the organisms that were living in a specific area, basically, because the sea level has risen, they'll have to shift inwards or downwards. And when you're shifting, you're going to have extinction of species and all that. So you need to really have a very strong environmental perspective and background to understand that anything that touches on environment has a ripple effect. The same way, when the First World War industrializing, during the Industrial Revolution, which they are very proud of, basically, the carbon that you are emitting, it is not just going to be concentrated on the boundaries. The environment that does not know country borders, does not know continents. It's going to cut across and enter the whole Earth's ecosystem. It will spread. It's like the animals. There are birds who fly from Africa to Europe and back and forth. And the environment does not really know countries or parties or developed or developing. So when they emit, that is going to and they cause what we call the global warming, which is climate change. It is across
cuts across.
So it starts in their country, then it spreads to the others. Because there is that ecosystem overlap, basically. Environment is very interconnected. So you need to understand the interconnectedness of the environment if you're able to basically try and articulate and find justification of why they who caused it basically are affecting the rest of us, because we are interlinked. We might not be in the same country, but we are interlinked practically because we are all connected. The environment does not know a country. Yes, so you'll find that their activities, their development activities, we are all feeling the impacts, even us. It has trickled down even to us because of that concept of environmental is like a cross-cutting, basically, and there's that overlap and transfer. So their activities, they're affecting all of us basically equally, but you're advantage because you already have the finances, you've made business out of it. Us, we don't have the finances, and we didn't even create it. You created it, basically. So we are paying for your crimes.
And your mistakes.
Yes.
I want to call them that.
For your mistakes.
So I'm happy that is like cleared out, and now we know why we are suffering more than they are actually than them, because they're advanced, they have facilities, they have everything new. But compared to us, we're a little behind. So we go back to the issues of climate financing now.
Yes.
And I know there are mechanisms, different mechanisms, because these monies come in different forms, different forms and different names and different. Exactly. So I just want you to mention like a few that is available. Like, guys, this basically means that when money comes, so that you people can know this money is intended for this is supposed to cater for this is what we have. So we just make this thing clear. There's a climate financing in whole, but let us know all of these needs, what are they meant for? So maybe you just touch on a few and what they're meant to do on like an international level before we come to
local
the
level.
National.
So the most prominent one is the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility, the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, basically, then we had the CDM, Clean Development Mechanism, basically. So I'll touch on a few. CDM is a bit complex, but I'll touch on it a bit. So when we started in Rio, telling the story of Rio, basically, they need to set up a facility. So the GEF serves climate change, and basically it cuts across. It serves climate change, it serves biodiversity conservation, desertification, forest, it serves all environmental issues basically. But it is in very minimal quantities. Minimal. From the recent report, they've reduced their funding window basically on climate change because they are looking at it from a broader perspective. They are still stuck on the Rio conventions, the global international conventions, basically. Yes. But after that, we've tried to set up the adaptation fund. Adaptation fund was a bit difficult because it was the first time we were coordinating ourselves as climate change people, and within the climate change people, we had what we call the Kyoto Protocol. Protocol is how we are organizing ourselves. It is like a modality, it is like the program, basically. But this Kyoto Protocol tended to favor the developed rather compared to us. Yes.
This money is meant for.
Yes.
Okay.
And even the adaptation fund, the how we coordinate it gave them more leeway and gave them room to get out of it was non-binding, get out of them. So you'll find
you feel like walking away,
you could just walk out, non-binding commitment, and they're only going to fund. It's like the donor saying we are the one going to fund what we want. So it was like a donor approach, which should not be the case. This should be an intergenerational, it will be like an intergenerational justice approach where you owe us. It's not we are asking you, we are begging you, are helping us.
Okay. Let me put it in like an easier way before you can continue. Guys, this means you remember back then we were talking about them paying for the how can I say it, for the mistakes they've caused, for the hardships they're causing on the environment, okay? But now someone is telling you, we have done 1, 2, 3 things to bring problems, but we're going to determine how much we are going to give.
And in what sector? You see, the adaptation fund, the priority for developing countries, especially Africa, is not mitigation. it is adaptation, because we don't have industries, we don't have gold mines, we don't have those things. Our issue is, how are we living with the consequences of your action? So this money foundation was supposed to help us to live with the consequences of your actions. But you'll find funding was it was very small. It's like a one-time thing. It was practically like a one-time hit. And it did not serve. It's been a struggle in adaptation. And right now we're talking about increasing financing for adaptation, because we realize our needs are not being met. First of all, you want to engage with us as if you want us to solve your problem, but how we are affected is different from how you're affected. Our needs is adaptation. Basically, your needs is mitigation. You need to reduce your carbon emissions. We need to adapt, because the carbon emissions for Africa is less than 15%. And for that, it's only a few countries in Africa who are responsible for that emissions. So why you should focus more on what is our priority, which is adapting, living with the consequences, because we don't have industries. Where are the industries? Where are the coal mines? Where do the mitigating? Exactly.
Okay. So
then we have the GEF, the GCF, the Green Climate Fund.
Yes. So yes.
So basically, after we realized where we were as developing countries, that this coordination, this protocol, Kyoto Protocol, was not really working for us. It was working more for the other people. We said, no. We need to start, we need to change how we are, rethink this. So we started strategizing towards the Paris Agreement, basically. The Paris Agreement would try and bring us to a par and hold you responsible, so that you don't get out of, like, say, now you're not going to fund, to make it binding, basically. And to support the Paris Agreement in 2010, it takes time. So when you want to, by the time you get to Paris Agreement, negotiation begins like 6 or 5 years back. So 5 years back in 2010, started discussion about a new funding mechanism focused on climate change specifically, and how we want it to work better for us, basically. Yes. So we started that and started coining the Green Climate Fund. So in 2020, that was in 2010. In 2013, it became operational, and it was supposed to serve now in 2015 when we launched the Paris Agreement, because now we have a funding mechanism, under the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is basically looking to reduce it. It has gaps, but it is an improvement from previous, basically. Because initially, even when we began, we didn't have data, we didn't have science, we didn't have that information. But after this, you've seen the IPCC reports, the reports from the scientific community, basically, and we were able to make an informed, improved decision. So the Paris Agreement goal was to keep global temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius, basically, below pre-industrial level, and limit to 1.5 degrees, basically. And this one had a financial commitment of $100 billion goal by 2020. From the developed to the developing. Yes, now we're starting to hold you to account. Yes.
No, this is binding, I hope.
Yes, this is binding. Yes. So basically, by 2020, you're supposed to mobilize 100 billion, basically, by the developed world to give to the developing.
Is there like these 100 billion for developed countries? Is there a specific maybe percentages that maybe the US is supposed to give like 10%, the European Union gives this percentage, or you people just agree at the end of the day we want 100 billion?
What we said, we left it. We said at the end of we want 100 billion. That's what we said. But 2020 was a COVID year. So by 2021, we were at 78%, basically. We had not met the target. So we just said, you guys need to give us money. Basically, we didn't say you have to do this. How it happens in negotiations? Yes, here at the national level in Kenya, we're making a position and we have our position, but we don't negotiate as one country. We negotiate as a bloc. So Kenya is going to negotiate, for example, from Kenya position goes to the AGN level. So you speak Africa group of negotiators. So the African continent is going to make its position as one solitary group. Then we're going to have a larger group for the developed countries called the G77, basically. So developing countries, basically, because we have Africa, we have Latin America, other people also experience the same challenges. So we come in as a bloc. After we've solidified our national position, it forms part of the Africa, then the G77. G77 now brings all the developing countries
together.
basically together. So it is developing versus developed.
Okay.
You understand? So the developed are supposed to mobilize this and give to the developing.
Okay.
And we are not asking for it, we are not requesting for it basically. So, but by 2021, because 2020 we can't really count, we were around 78. We didn't really meet the $100 billion goal.
Okay.
You understand? Because the language that they say basically, you'll find these political figures coming to the TV and saying, and media is full and saying, yes, we must fight this, we might do this. But you need to forget the technical work. These things are negotiated before the president, even after the president. Those that do the technical work. Their language comes out totally different from what is on the newspaper, from what is on the that, because it's just a political statement. And they make it in a manner that you know it's a politician because it's a president or a figure. It's not binding. And they said, where did I write that? Because they stood up and then they spoke. So where did we write that? And what they say, they will put in a political number where they leave it vague, so that you can't really tie them. But at the negotiations, you can tie them and say, in 2015, you said this and this is usually recorded at the COPs at the negotiations. You hear paragraph 2.2, this. So we tie you because it is written. Anything that is not written. And even politicians are now smart, basically. There's a lot of social media and rapport and climate change. That's why in terms of whatever they're going to write or it's written in their name, basically, they leave it vague. So that they don't take it. It looks fancy, but it is vague.
Everyone can take it how they want.
Yes, you can interpret it how you want.
So I'd like to take you back to the fact that they didn't meet the target, that is $100 billion US dollars that they were supposed to give to developing countries. So now, this is from the Paris Agreement. And guys, remember all these agreements with their names come from the countries where they were formulated in.
Yes.
The Kyoto Protocol was in Japan, Paris Agreement in France, and things like that. So since the Rio Agreement was not it's okay going back to the table and realizing this is actually not working for us. Let's twitch it and find a way of making it work. And that I can commend developing countries for. That is how it is. As you grow, you get data, you advance, okay? This is now the Paris Agreement, and you say it's binding. But then we're being told these people didn't reach their targets. Where does the rest go? Or because it's supposed to be 100 billion in a year, and we got 78, the year is done, so you people just wait for the next 100 billion. Then they'll fall short again. You said it's binding. It has consequences. What are the consequences so far? What have been the consequences so far?
So basically what happens is that when we met in 2021 in the UK in Glasgow, we realized that we did not meet the $100 billion goal. So we had to come back to the negotiation table and say, you guys, you promised this, and you have given this. It is not enough, practically, basically. So what happens is the parties negotiated, developed and developing countries negotiated, and to them, even as part of those negotiations, one of the key agenda items is what you call long-term finance. Long-term finance is that you'll find the developed country, before they give you the full, it's a negotiation, full money, it might be intentional, they want to come in and say, tukikupea hii na usirudi. That is what we call the long-term finance. But see, we are saying, no, you need to keep giving us that. Now they're trying to change it before they give you the 100, because once you give the 100, it's a negotiation. Kishwapea hiyo, ishaenda. You can't now put on new clothes. And then pia tunaweza ruka. It's a negotiation, basically. So what they're trying to do in long-term finance is to kill it. Killing it means that once we give you the 100 billion, we tumemalizana. Which is not the case. So now they're dragging it.
The effects of their benefits are way bigger than 100
So
billion.
now when the goal was pushed to 2025, basically, because it was in 2020, now target pushed to 2025. By 2025, should have the $100 billion. Then we see how you start providing additional. Every year, you give 100, like that, basically. So they're trying to kill it in what we call the long-term finance, in terms of we don't they're finding routes, legal routes
yeah.
on how to navigate. It's just like court case, lawyer versus lawyer. Then you'll find also, now the other loophole that is there in climate finance was the issue of no global definition of climate finance. Someone is giving you development aid, they want to call it climate finance.
Exactly. That is what I wanted to ask. If, for example, US decides, oh, you people have had like floods. Right now we are like meaning El Nino is coming. And then, for example, the European Union decides, let's support Kenya or support these parts of Africa that have been affected with maybe 20 billion US dollars or even 200 million US dollars. Is it also counted at the end of the day as US or European Union going to stand, we said we were going to give this, but let's remove the 200 million that we gave to East Africa. So that is what I want to know.
So what happens is those are some of the, it happens, those are some of the legal ways they're trying to dodge giving us financing. So they'll start saying that money that we gave you to build a road, which is developmental aid, basically.
Yeah.
That one comes with climate finance. So they start dodging. Another way they're trying to do now, we look at what happens in climate finance. The sad thing is that they're giving you in terms of loans, which should not be the case.
Okay.
Loans. Loans in terms of, you'll find, for example, for the GCF, for example, you'll find the only form of grant you'll get is for technical support. But for the actual project implementation, it is a loan, which becomes very tricky because it doesn't really make sense if you're paying us for a damage that you did. And then now you'll hear the language as of I think COP27, the language that they were using was that we need to change the GCF from a co-financier to a co-investor. You see how the language changes? It's all about the language of English. Co-financier, how GCF operate co-financing in terms of you have this, you've already set aside it, we add you that. Now they're saying you want to be a co-investor. That's a smart way of starting to dodge co-investor. Now we start asking you for return on investments. You see how now they're starting to dodge.
It's like the SGR
investments.
We help you build it.
Yes.
But also we are going to own some part of it.
Yes.
All right.
So now they can fund only where they can get something back in return. Exactly. So that one now becomes difficult. And then us, of course, for Africa, our only priority, key priority is adaptation. You understand? But when you look at, for example, the global landscape of climate finance, CPI has done this. CPI is Climate Policy Initiative. It has done the landscape of climate finance, global landscape, and global landscape of climate finance in Kenya. For the global landscape, 2018-2019, you'll find 92% of the financing, even if it's loan, went to mitigation. Less than 5% went to adaptation. That's of the report 2018-2019. In Kenya, 78% of the financing, 2018, mitigation. Why is that, basically?
What are we mitigating?
Exactly, what are we mitigating? And then it's also because we're not as strong in the negotiations as we think. We are still developing. Because the reason is, when you look at mitigation and adaptation, basically, mitigation is easier to quantify. Someone will say that, hey, I have funded 50 cook stoves. Adaptation, how do you quantify? Hey, that community is now feeling better. And the person writing the check, in much as we negotiate, the person writing the check is not a finance person, is not a environment person, is an accountant, matrix, is an economist. He wants to say, I've given you this, give me something back. That is the only thing that person knows, basically. The person approving the accountant at the end of the day, you understand? It is so partly our fault because we've not been able to develop measures at the global level to quantify adaptation. That's why the Paris Agreement, the weak part of it is the adaptation part. In Paris Agreement, the 2.5 degrees, that is linked to the mitigation because 2.5 degrees, you've calculated from reducing emissions, basically. So you can be able to track that, it has figures and numbers in data. You can quantify it. But so we have a global goal on mitigation. Now we're working towards global goal on adaptation because that one might give us opportunity to unlock more adaptation financing that is focused to helping us basically to live with the consequences of what they did. So we also have that. So you'll find most of them, speaking to them, someone tell you, it's not that we don't want to fund this. But me, at the end of the day, what my boss wants to see is 50 cook stoves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 50.
Evidence.
Countable, tangible. That is one opportunity that young people need to unpack. It means innovation and technology gets priority in financing because it is something you can see, you can touch, practical. You understand? But adaptation. So how want to
Adaptation is
quantify
vague.
how making a community feel better? It's like coming to and the boss has given you and telling your boss, hey boss, we've given those people in Samburu money, that community now feels better. They feel better. How do you quantify that, basically? Because even then they're getting money from somewhere. Everyone's looking for money from somewhere. So those are some of the intricacies that are affecting us. These the political, they don't want to. So the interest, also the technical aspect of it, the reality of it. They want to finance, basically. But how do you finance?
Okay. This new climate finance is so interesting as much as it is also so complex at the same time. And I'm so happy you got to shed a light on this, even though it is at the international level. Guys, I'd like to end this here. But since we've only talked about climate financing on an international level, how that money comes down to us, I'd love that we will have another session with Dolphine again to talk about now climate financing locally. Okay. Yes. Now, on things that we relatable, okay, things that are going on around us here in Kenya. How is climate change being financed? This money that trickles down from the developing countries coming down to us, the 100 billion we are talking about, the green climate finance, adaptation finance, the global environmental facility, all these things, once they reach here, maybe we can also, can I ask you here, put you on the spot, that we are going to talk about climate financing locally?
Yes, locally led climate financing. Yes, especially for young people.
Exactly, that is what we want. Opportunities that young people have in the climate financing space and all that. How we can make ourselves better, because I always like saying this, we are going to be the most affected, age, whatever, in this climate change crisis, because this is an experience now, and we're still going to experience them in the future. And as someone once said in this, and I'm still going to quote it, that old men made the decisions for you, and they're still making decisions right now for us, yet it's us who are going to actually
live with the consequences.
With them.
Yes.
So, guys, that is all me and Dolphine had today, and she has promised that she'll be back here again on the Loud Voice podcast for us to talk about climate financing locally. So, from me and Dolphine here, we'd just like to say bye and see you next time.
Bye. Yes.